1949, the owner of a failing car company stood before 1,600 angry employees. His company was bankrupt. The banks had cut off his funding. His factories were still in ruins from the war. With tears in his eyes, he bowed his head and resigned from the company that bore his family name, believing he was a failure. He died just 2 years later, never knowing that the small, struggling workshop he left behind would become the largest automobile manufacturer in history. Toyota today is an empire worth over $200 billion, producing 10 million cars a year. But behind the reliability and the sales figures lies a story of devastating failure, family honor, and a man who sacrificed his life to turn a wooden loom into a global superpower. This is the tragic yet inspiring story of Kiichiro Toyota. To understand Toyota, we first have to look at a poor village in rural Japan in the late 19th century. This was the world of Kiichiro's father, Sakichi Toyota. Sakichi was born into a family of poor carpenters. At the time, Japan was still very traditional. Most people in his village, including his mother, spent their entire lives painfully weaving cotton by hand. It was backbreaking, slow work. Watching his mother suffer through this labor every night, Sakichi became obsessed with a single idea. He wanted to build a machine to help her. He had no education. He had no money. The villagers laughed at him, calling him a weirdo for tinkering with wood instead of working in the fields. But after years of failure, Sakichi invented Japan's first power loom. It was a revolution. It automatically stopped if a thread broke, a concept that would later become the DNA of Toyota's engineering. But while Sakichi conquered the textile world, his son Kiichiro had a different obsession. In the 1920s, Kiichiro traveled to New York and London. He saw something that didn't exist in Japan: streets filled with Ford Model Ts and Chevrolets. He was captivated. He realized that the future wasn't in textiles, it was in automobiles. But when he returned home and proposed building a car, his family's company thought he was insane. "We are a loom company," the board told him. "American cars like Ford and GM are too powerful. If we try to compete, we will be crushed." They refused to fund him. Kiichiro didn't care. He set up a secret corner in the loom factory. He and a small team of engineers bought a Chevrolet, took it apart piece by piece, and tried to reverse engineer it. They had no experience. They forged the cylinder blocks by hand. They used trial and error. In 1935, they finally built their first prototype, the A1. But it was a disaster. It had barely any horsepower, it overheated, and it looked like a cheap copy of a Chrysler. To make matters worse, to fund this hobby, Kiichiro had burned through millions of the family's savings. The board was furious. But Kiichiro begged for one more chance. He officially spun off the car division, naming it Toyota instead of Toyota, because it took 8 brushstrokes to write, a lucky number in Japan. He was ready to take on the world. But the world had other plans. In the late 1930s, Japan entered the Second World War. The government took total control of the economy. Passenger car production was banned. Kiichiro's dream of building cars for the people was dead. Instead, the military forced Toyota to build simple, stripped-down trucks for the army. They were so short on materials that they built trucks with only one headlight and brakes on only the rear wheels. As the war turned against Japan, the situation became apocalyptic. American B-29 bombers filled the skies. Kiichiro watched as the industrial city of Aichi, the heart of his company, was turned into a wasteland of fire and twisted metal. By the time Japan surrendered in 1945, Kiichiro Toyota stood in the ashes of his factory. The economy was destroyed. People were starving. Inflation was at 100%. Nobody could afford food, let alone a car. General Motors and Ford were back to producing millions of vehicles, while Toyota was making pots and pans out of leftover metal just to keep the lights on. Experts from the U.S. military visited the Toyota plant and laughed. They wrote a report saying, "This company is primitive. It will never survive." But Kiichiro refused to give up. He believed that Japan needed cars to rebuild. He poured everything into a new economy model, the Toyopet. But the economy collapsed in 1949. Toyota couldn't sell cars because no one had money. The company was drowning in debt. The banks demanded that Kiichiro fire 2,000 employees if he wanted a loan to survive. Kiichiro had always treated his workers like family. The idea of firing them broke him. The union went on strike. For months, the factory was silent. The company was bleeding money every single day. Finally, to save the company, Kiichiro made the ultimate sacrifice. He accepted the bank's terms to cut the workforce, but on one condition: he would resign as president. He took full responsibility for the failure. In June 1950, he walked out of the factory gates for the last time. The stress of the war, the failure of his dream, and the shame of the resignation destroyed his health. Just 18 months later, in 1952, Kiichiro Toyota collapsed and died from a cerebral hemorrhage. He was only 57 years old. He died believing he had failed his father and his family. But his death sparked a fire in the company. His cousin Eiji Toyota and a genius engineer named Taiichi Ono vowed to make sure Kiichiro's sacrifice wasn't in vain. They analyzed why they failed. They realized they couldn't just copy Ford. They didn't have the space or the money for massive inventory. So, they invented something new: the just-in-time system. They only made exactly what was needed, when it was needed. They empowered every worker on the line to stop the entire factory if they saw a single defect, something unthinkable in American factories. This became known as the Toyota production system. In the 1960s, they returned to America. At first, their car, the Toyopet, failed miserably. It couldn't handle American highways. But they didn't quit. They listened. They went back to Japan and built a car specifically for the oil crisis era, the Toyota Corolla. It was cheap, it was fuel efficient, and it was indestructible. By 1980, Toyota wasn't just competing with Ford and GM, it was beating them. The American car giants were shocked. They tried to copy Toyota's methods, but they couldn't copy the culture of discipline and perfection that Kiichiro had died to protect. Today, Toyota is the standard for manufacturing across the globe. From the Prius to the Land Cruiser, they are symbols of reliability. Kiichiro Toyota never saw his cars conquer the streets of New York or London. He never saw the billions in revenue. But his philosophy of Kaizen, continuous improvement, lives on in every engine they build. It is a reminder that sometimes the greatest successes are built on the ashes of our most painful failures. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.